When we know why we're doing something, it provides us clarity on the best way for us to go about accomplishing it. That's kind of what we're going to look at today is the why behind facilitator guides. Why are we going about doing what we do with it? If you guys don't mind, if you guys can just let me know that you can hear me in the chat. I think everything's going through, but better yet to start off safe rather than sorry. This idea though of being able to know the why. Let's look at this from an example. Let's say I tasked you with building a course on customer service, right? That gives us a place to start from. But if I actually say, you know what, the why behind this is we're getting bad reviews, customer satisfaction scores when we return items to a store, it gives us a better grounds for where we want to go and figuring out how to best lay out that course. Same concept's going to apply when we actually look at building, using materials. So if we're going to be building a facilitator guide, why do we use it? What pieces should be involved? Or why are we using a participant? And what are we hearing from there? So that's the idea. So we're going to dive into this, and we're going to get going on this Learning and Development Lunch Hour. So everyone, thank you for joining me today. I'm glad it looks like we're having good sound issue or no sound issues as of yet today, which is it's a win for us right now with the Learning and Development Lunch Hour. There always seems to be something technical, but first off, want to thank people for showing up. Layla, let me know. Thank you for letting me know you're hearing everything fine. Rachel, thank you for joining from the San Francisco Bay Area. Love that Liz was able to join in again. If you guys haven't had a chance on Wednesdays, you should check out her live stream. She does some amazing stuff there. LaShonda, thank you from joining from Tampa. So as you guys, thank you for taking time out of your day. I've tried to keep these to about a half hour or so, but I know your time's precious, so I want to get you some information, get you guys some actionable items, and then we'll be able to, you'll be able to go and put these into place. All right. So high level, why are we building with guidebooks, right? What is that? What's a specific role? What role do they play in our whole training? And I really like to think about my guidebooks kind of in the way we think about why do we do a course, right? We build training to achieve a specific goal, right? And that goal is driving us towards some sort of business objective or business goal, right? Simple enough. We can step that back a level and look at our materials the same way, right? So we have a goal of our course, and our guidebook, whether it's facilitator, whether it's participant, maybe those are generally the two you're going to use. Maybe you may break out a third one in terms of a producer guide if you're doing virtual, but generally that would be would tie that into a facilitator guide. But the role of the guidebook is driving us towards the course goal, right? And so the facilitator guide goes it in one way, the participant guide goes about it in a different way because we have different audiences. So with that being said, if we look at, if I break this down into what's the purpose of a guidebook, right? And I could probably flush these out, but these are the three that really jump out to me. So first one is, I'm using the guidebook to help me achieve the goal of the course, right? It is a factor in the delivery. If I'm the facilitator, it's a factor for the participant and how they're retaining the information. So it's helping me get to that course goal. Number two, it's driving consistency across the board. So what do I mean by consistency? Think of if you're doing a training and it could be taught today, on Friday, March 11th by me. It may be being taught in April. It may have already been taught last month, last year. So how do we make sure when it occurred, or whoever was in a specific training gets the same material as someone who took the same course at a different time, right? So it's consistency there. It's consistency of different trainers, right? Maybe I teach it, maybe Rachel teaches it, maybe, Jim teaches it. So we have consistency in those locations or in that area. There's consistency in location as well, right? So if I teach it in Boston and someone's teaching it in St. Louis and in San Francisco, how do we make sure it's consistent across those ways? Other ways of consistency, the other one that I would really throw out there is mode of teaching or the platform, right? So if we're looking at this in virtual, how do we make sure if we're doing our training, and this time it has to be in WebEx versus Zoom versus Teams, we're doing breakout rooms. How do we make sure that experience can happen across different platforms that do different things, handle breakout rooms or features differently? And to me, it happens in the guidebook, right? We lay out exactly what we want to occur, so no matter who's doing it, where it's happening, what platform it is, we have that information. So that was, my number 2 for the purpose is consistency across the board. And number 3 kind of ties into this, but I think it's a bigger piece, is that training and within the training, our guidebooks are an asset of the organization, right? So one way we can make sure we have consistent training is that we write everything down, right? If we don't write things down and something happens, right? If I'm the only one who's ever taught this course and I can't come in, I was sick, I left, I got fired, whatever, that information goes out the window unless we view our training as an asset and treat it as such, meaning we keep records, things are written down. So the number 3 is really a big piece of, it's a higher level viewpoint. Like, I'm going to treat any training I build as an asset, which means I need to take care of it, I need to nurture it, I need to make changes, all those type of things, and it's all recorded. So for me, those are going to be the big purposes. Now, after that, it really comes down to, which audience are we talking with, right? Is it the facilitator? Is it the participant? And so on. So for me, we'll start with the facilitator guide. I see it really treats, the facilitator falls into 3 separate roles, or the facilitator guidebook falls into 3 separate roles. It's a reference aid, it's a study guide, and it's a ruling document. We'll talk a little bit about each one of these. Probably for right now, I would think numbers 1 and 2 are going to apply the most to everybody. Number 3 if this was a 101 course, right? Building Guidebooks 101. Ruling document concept, maybe 102, maybe 201. But it's a big enough item that I want to put it in a role because I think it does play a major portion of the building process as you move deeper in and get better at it. All right. So let's think of this as, let's first look at it in terms of the reference aid, right? This is what everyone thinks about facilitator guides, right? I'm teaching a course. I need to say this. I need to do this. I need to ask this. So the big one is if we want something to happen, we need to write it down, right? Or correct, not right. Right and right. It kind of gets confusing. But if we want facilitators to do something, we need to write it down. I can't tell you how many times I've seen something like, tell me explain the 5 important steps of this process, or what are the 7 key characteristics of this, of company XYZ, or, something along those lines, right? In the guidebook, it says that, and then there's nothing, right? There's no written down like what those 5 or those 7 things are. So if you're me, you probably know 3 of them, right? I know Rachel, she knows all 7, or, Jim over in St. Louis, he knows 5 of them, right? So we can't, if we don't write it down, we can't be consistent. So big thing, in the moment reference aid, if we want it to happen, we need to write it down. The terminology I've started to use for this is mechanics matter. And to prove that, or to show this point, I've actually come with, I've come with some items to show this. We're actually do a demonstration. All right, so we got peanut butter. Now, ideally, I was going to do this as a video because I would have more control, but I thought it would the point would be driven home better with showing it in person. But I'm not quite sure if you can probably see over my shoulder, this shoulder. One of my dogs is laying right there, so if he smells this, he may get a little excited. But let's say I was teaching a course or teaching someone how to build a peanut butter sandwich, right? So I got a piece of bread, I got a knife. Now, ideally, the first portion would be take your piece of bread, get your knife, put some peanut butter on it, and we'll spread it, right? Simple enough, right? The process of doing it, the mechanics of get the bread, get the knife, put peanut butter, spread. I can lay that out in a specific order. Now, if I don't lay that out and I scoop some of this and I don't put the bread in my hand first and I smear peanut butter onto my hand, the whole peanut butter sandwich goes sideways, right? So that's the idea, is if we want something to happen in a specific way or a specific order, we really need to wipe it. I'm thinking wiping because I now have peanut butter across my hand. But that's the, we want to put it in place on how we want it to happen so that it occurs exactly the way you want, right? And we can end up with a nice piece of bread with some peanut butter. Now throw some jelly or some cheese on it, and you've got a nice sandwich. But that's, here's the idea. Mechanics matter. If we want it to happen in a certain way for teaching, write it down in that way. So no matter if I'm teaching it, if you're teaching it, we all can do it, and the learner gets a consistent message and they know what to expect. All right. So that was my peanut butter and jelly example. All right. So then the second option, or the second item within a facilitator guide, the second role, is that it's a study guide, right? So the says, the do's, the asks, run this, show this video, right? That's something we're all very conscious of. Now, the other idea of the facilitator guide is a study guide is more so, how do we make sure, and it comes back to the consistency across the board. How do we make sure that, whether I'm teaching it or you're teaching it, that we all have the information to do so? And it's putting it in so that, if we want something to happen, it's in the guidebook, right? We want someone to, before the course, you want to come in and make sure we have all the material, right? For my example, I had peanut butter, right? I had a knife, I had bread. And yes, this is a huge thing of peanut butter. If you got 5 kids, they go through peanut butter like crazy. So I buy the biggest containers I can. But the other one for me is, in this, I had to make sure I had, a towel wet so that it would actually get the peanut butter off, and a container to put it in. So I made sure that all that the materials I needed for this little section were written down in my guidebook, right? So that to me would be a portion of the study guide stuff. How do we want to handle, pre-work? If this was virtual, how do we handle breakout rooms in Teams versus how do we handle breakout rooms in Zoom? All of that material is stuff that we need to have that would be available for our facilitators to do, or our producers to do. We get it in the guidebook, so when it comes time, they're going to lead the course, they can pull the documents, and right, they can pull the course off the shelf, flip it open, and be able to see exactly what they're looking for, right? So here, I'm going to flip over. Here's where things go awry for just a moment. Just bear with me one moment while I get this to work again correctly. All right. I apologize about that. Okay. So I have an example here. And that is the wrong monitor. So you guys get to see. I'll pull this over here. All right. So here is, this is an example of some items that you may see is in a study guide, right? Like whoever's going to be reading this, leading this course, what they can expect. I like to think of this like as about this guide. If I was to scroll a little bit further through this, what icons they could see, right? The icons we'll talk about this in another session, but everything you want them to be paying attention to or be aware of, we'll lay these things out. But here, let me zoom in on this one. So let's say, in a physical classroom environment, is there a specific way we want a room to be laid out? Great. If there is, put it in the guidebook, right? We're going to have people set up in breakout rooms or in case study sessions, and they need to be in groups of 4. Let's lay out the tables in a way that it's easy to get to groups of 4. So during the training, we don't have to take time and spread all those things out. We want to make sure it happens. Put it in the guidebook. In the upfront, I would call introductory materials, that study guide material, and people are able to know what to expect. So that's kind of the idea behind the study guides, right? So what type of materials do you need to have on hand? How do you want your room set up? How, if it's in virtual, how are we handling breakout rooms, or what polls need to be loaded up? All of those type of things we can put in a guidebook up front. All right. The last one that we had talked about, or I had brought up in terms of the facilitator guide, is this concept of the ruling document. So what I mean by the ruling document is that it boils down to the end goal is to have a facilitator guide and a participant guide. We need to build one first. One of them always has to be built first. So for me, I go with the facilitator guide because it's going to have everything I need to lead the course or for a course to be done, right? It's got all my upfront material, my prerequisites, all the materials I need to have on hand. What I'm saying, what I'm doing, what I'm showing. It's going to have references to what the participants are doing. So all the pieces that encompass it fall within the facilitator guide. And then from that facilitator guide, I can take pieces to build out the participant guide I need. So for me, it's like, to use a nerdy reference, if you look at the Lord of the Rings, this was the one ring to rule them all. For me, that's the facilitator guide. Everything that encompasses this specific training is in that guidebook. And then from that supplemental pieces, facilitator guide or participant guide, agendas, case studies, handouts or appendixes, all of those things can be pulled from that guidebook. So for me, those are the 3 roles of that facilitator guide. All right. What about the participant guide? So participant guide, to me, breaks down into 2 pieces. One, it's a training supplement, and it's also a post-course resource or post-training resource if you don't want to have the the alliteration going with it. So by training supplement, this would be something we would be talking, we're leading a course and we want to turn to page 37 for this activity, and you would be able to, the participants could go in there and they get the information on what they're doing in the activity, and they can be working on it individually or in the group, or, go to page, 52, and you're going to be able to start filling in the, take this short assessment or whatever those type of things are, right? So things that we're doing, having them do in the course that you need a guidebook for, right? Simple enough. Training supplement. And I think that's what most everyone thinks of a participant guide for currently. Number 2, that post-course resource is really, I think, is the greater value of a participant guide. All right, and for those who watched last week's episode about take your presentations to a higher level with a handout, same concepts fall with this, right? If we want someone to take something away from our course, the simplest way to do it is to put it in their hands, right? If we want them to get something out of this course, they get the handout that they can go home or take it back to their desk, and they're able to, when things come up, flip through it, get the information that they need, or it's got the visual reminders. You've got pictures of what slides were shown or graphs or charts. All that information's in there and available for them to use. It could also be, additional resources. We're referencing them out to, websites or other e-learning modules, things like that, but it's all in one location that they're able to, view and use at any given time after the fact. It helps them fight that forgetting curve, right? The other portion, one I said was sensory recall. In last week's episode, sensory recall, one way to help lessen the loss of information, or it doesn't help lessen, but I think it helps you get back to information that you may not have grasped or be able to grasp right away. But we can also put in, post-course activities we want them to do so they can start applying the information that they had just taken from the course and put it into action, right? So if we learn something and then apply something, you have a better chance of having it stick, right? Learn, apply, and then repeat. So that's, those, not the participant guide, it's two big roles, right? It's a training supplement in the moment, and it's that post-course resource, right? In that post-course resource, put in if they have questions, who to reach out to, who's that contact person, so they have that information and can move forward. But that's, really high level. I mean, the role of the document, it's not really, it's not a deep conversation, right? I've really pretty much talked about as much as I can in this session, but I think it's so important to know why are we using a guidebook? How can we set guidebooks up to help us get down that line to the goal of the course, right? If we come back to the purpose here, right? If we're trying to achieve the goal of the course, how we lay things out, right? The order in which we teach, right? Do we put peanut butter on our hand first, or we get the bread in our hand before we put it in, right? Laying things out, the mechanics of how we do it are going to matter. Making sure everything's written down so that whoever's teaching the course gets the information that they need, right? Or the way we write it down in our facilitator guide and we want to talk about it, are we consistently getting that message across into the participant book so that we don't have, we're not talking about a process one way as we teach it, but when they're reviewing it in their participant book, it's laid out completely different, and there's a disconnect, right? So how we go about things with our guidebooks and why we do it really drive, it will take your course from where it currently is at to the next level. So question I generally get when I work with people about this is, well, Pat, I don't have enough time, right? I can only do one guidebook. Which one should I do? And my answer to that is, first, I always say, time is a huge factor. It's important to everybody. But my gut answer to this is one I generally give to my kids. It's figure it out. They're both important. They both play key roles, and you need to truly have a successful training program, you need both of them, because they're serving different audiences. They're serving the different needs of those audiences, but they're both driving you towards that goal of the course, which is driving you towards your business objective or your business goal. Now, sometimes there just isn't enough time, right? So if you had to life on the line, which one would you choose? My first answer would still be both. But if it really came down to it, I would say I would put my effort first in the facilitator guide. Do your facilitator guide. But, and this is where we get into the 102 type course or the 201 type course of building facilitator guides. And, eventually we will work our way through all of these. But processes and strategies that we use building our guidebooks can take us from having, just a facilitator guide to 60, 70, 80, 90% of a participant guide in a few moments, right? How we talk about audiences, or how do we talk about specific pieces of training that's going to be in both a facilitator guide and a participant guide. So when I move it from one document to another, it's very easy and I don't have to rework material. Like, which audience are we writing the voice to? So these are all strategies that we will talk about for, in other sessions. But this is one of those ones where, it's coming back to that ruling document portion of the role of the facilitator guide. So if you were to say, I can only build one, which one do you go with? Build your facilitator guide first. But you really need to find the time to do both, because they both are very, very important. So, we're coming right down. We're getting up to about the half-hour mark. So here's my takeaways. Here's what I want you to get out of this. Figure out what is your why. What's your purpose of guidebooks, right? And I think my purpose will, what I view, if we come back to these, driving us to the goal of the course, we want to ensure consistency. We want our training to be an asset of the organization. Those, I think, will apply to you, to everybody. But maybe you have some additional things. Figure out what those whys are. Write them down. Right? Now look at what you're currently doing in your guidebooks. Right? Is what I'm currently doing in my guidebooks getting me to where I want this, to where step one, that why? What's the purpose? How do I want my guidebooks to work for me going forward? What are we currently doing that's getting us there? What aren't we doing what aren't we doing that we could, or what are we doing that we really shouldn't be doing? So look at those type of things. And then from there, you're going to be able to set down your structure of what you're going to need, right? Think of it in a facilitator guide. It's a study guide. So what type of information do I need to have up front before I get into say this, do this, ask this? So before I get into the in-the-moment reference aid, what pieces, what structure, how do I want to lay that out so it aligns with my why, my purpose? Do the same thing with your participant guides. So I think, these takeaways they're a little bit more, a little more thought-provoking than action-provoking. Number 3, you're going to start doing some action. But you need to put in a little bit of that, the brain power into this. But like I said in the beginning, the best part with this is that once you get going with it, you kind of set up your structure. It becomes rote. It's like muscle memory. You don't have to think about it. I mean, every once in a while you'll make some tweaks, but once you get your system down, this is how we do it. I don't have to think about it, and I can put my energy into what's the best way to, how do I get my the learner from where they currently are towards the goal that the next course is. And I'm not worried about how am I structuring my guidebooks to get them there, right? That's already in place. But with all of these, I want to thank you for your time, for joining me today. The recordings, it will be available on the link in the event for LinkedIn as a post or after the fact. But it's also on my YouTube channel, which I did put the link into comments in LinkedIn. But any questions you have, please reach out to me. I'm always available. If you want to kind of look at our process, what I'm doing, how I go about it, tools and systems that I use, I'm happy to do so. But with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of the Friday. Enjoy the rest of your lunch hour, and we will talk next week. All right? Take care, folks.